Okay. Planning Commission meeting of October 9, 2019 will come to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Secretary will call the roll.
Commissioner Tolson?
Here.
Commissioner Castleberry?
Here.
Commissioner Rice?
Here.
Vice Chairperson Mann?
Here.
Chairperson Hodge?
Here. Okay, may I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Motion is made by Commissioner Castleberry. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Rice. Absent objection, the agenda is approved. Approval of minutes. May I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Motion is made by Commissioner Tolson. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Castleberry. Absent objection, the minutes are approved. Declaration of conflict. The Secretary will read the declaration of conflict.
If any member of the Planning Commission may have a conflict of interest or any reason why that member must abstain from consideration of any matter on this agenda, he or she should so declare at this time.
Any conflicts to declare? Seeing none, we'll press forward. Public statements. This is the time and place allotted for public statements or comments on all items other than public hearing items. Is there anyone who wishes to be heard on a matter not otherwise on the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll go forward. Correspondence. Is there any correspondence from the Deputy Director?
Thank you, Chairman Hodge. On the dais tonight, you'll find two supplements. The first one is comments, this project for 11A1, the Enclave project at the Farmers Building. We prepared a mitigated negative declaration for that. The public noticing period ended this week. We received a few late arriving comments from both the County Watershed Protection District and Caltrans, and those comments are noted in the memo and responded to, as well as contained in your supplemental item. The second supplement were, since the packet went out, the applicant and staff have been reviewing the conditions of approval for item 11A1. You'll see in the email certain items that were either deleted or amended, and those are contained in your staff report. Both of these supplements are provided for the public as well, and they can be found on the dais outside, on the table outside in the lobby.
Thank you. So I think we have a consent calendar item tonight. Consent calendar. May I have a motion for approval of the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
I second.
Go ahead.
Okay, a motion was made by Commissioner Castleberry to approve, seconded by both Mr. Mann, Commissioner Mann and Commissioner Tolson. So unless there's any other objection, the consent calendar stands approved. Continued business, there is none. Public hearings. This is the time and place set for a public hearing on consideration of GPA 104, SPS 31, ZS 744, PDS 1066, TPS 693, TT 6024, and the project's mitigated negative declaration therefore. Are there any ex parte communications to report?
I did. I had an email with Elaine Freeman just about this project, specifically the difference between bocce ball and pickleball.
You had to ask that? Okay, very good. May we have an oral report on this matter by staff?
Yes. We're just going to wait for the computer screen to come up. There we go. Good evening, Commissioners. Before we introduce the item, I just wanted to provide a little bit of background and context for both the Planning Commission and the audience. This project, what we call the Enclave, which is going to be proposed where the current Farmers Building is located, we've been working with the applicant for a little over a year on this one. The applicant met with staff and city leaders and actually even with the public last December to discuss kind of concepts of what they were looking for on this project site. This project did go to the City Council last January at a general plan pre-screening, at which time they did receive a unanimous approval to proceed with filing a formal application. The applicant filed their formal application around May, and that we've been working with the applicant, to deem the application complete, preparing the environmental document, and preparing it here for you tonight. What's the main issue here is what we call a general plan amendment. One of the key aspects to this project is to change the current general plan land use designation from its current commercial designation, which does not allow any residential uses, to what's being proposed tonight is a mixed use land use designation. And again, just for context, I wanted to kind of provide both for the audience, for the Planning Commission as well as the audience, that the farmer site is located right around there in the center of town, next to our other Sycamore Village shopping centers. And that color doesn't really stand out, but it's really a dark red on our land use map and actually on the screen in front of you. The other areas where we have mixed use designations include the Tapo and Alamo corner, the Tapo Street corner, and I think my, can I borrow your pointer? I think mine. There we go. There we go. So we over here in this area of town, you'll see some of the mixed-use designations that apply both to Tapo and Alamo and Tapo Street, as well as the Mountain Gate Shopping Center, and then, of course, some of the areas around our Metrolink. And these were adopted back in 2012 when we were updating our general plan. And back when we were updating the general plan, the Farmers Building was actually occupied, and this center was very healthy. And where the city was putting those mixed-use designations were over the commercial shopping centers that needed a little bit of help. They were underperforming, they were vacant, and so the mixed-use designations were added there specifically to encourage redevelopment. So this area is coming kind of after the general plan update and asking specifically to use the same concept, to be adding commercial and residential uses in otherwise an area that's in transition. It's got residential to the east, it has commercial to the west and to the south, and so there's a lot of logical reasons why this made sense for to bring forward to tonight. So those were some of the basics. One thing I can say about the Farmers Building is that it's obsolete. We looked at a number of adaptive reuse options before we brought this project before you tonight. It really doesn't lend itself for somebody to take it over and reuse it for something else, and so demolishing is probably the most logical thing to do. We've had other tenants, including the county, looking at taking it over, but it's just much too big for any singular tenant. And so the most logical sense is maybe to redevelop the site and demo all the current buildings. So that's a little bit of the background. I just wanted to state that, and otherwise I'll turn it over to both Senior Planner Jennifer Santos, who will be making the presentation, and our Environmental Planner Monica Dion, who's here to assist. Jennifer?
Good evening. The site is formerly occupied by the Farmers Insurance Headquarters building. It has been vacant since 2013. The vacant 240,000 square foot 6-story office building and the approximate 21,000 square foot training center and storage building and parking lot contain many mature trees. All of these are being proposed to be demolished. There are 4 driveway entrances, 2 along Galena and 2 along Cochran Street. The property is bordered by Cochran Street and Galena Avenue and the State Route 118 freeway. Existing surrounding uses consist of the residential retail shopping centers to the west and south, McDonald's and the U.S. Post Office at the north and southeast corners of the site. Multifamily residential neighborhoods are across Galena Avenue to the east. The applicant is requesting approval to construct a mixed-use project that consists of 164 units, common open space areas, and a 6,000 square foot commercial retail building. The project entitlement requests also include a general plan amendment, specific plan, zone change, plan development permit, a tentative parcel map, and a tentative tract map. As mentioned, access to the site would be provided by 2 existing driveways on Cochrane Street and Galena Avenue. The applicant is proposing to maintain the existing driveways except for one off of Galena Avenue. The northern driveway will be located to accommodate the design of the interior private streets and to improve the efficiency of the circulation throughout the site. The main entrance will be from Galena Avenue, with the other driveways also serving as entrances and exits. The internal streets will be conditionally designed to meet the Ventura County Fire District standards. On January 28th, the City Council approved a general plan amendment pre-screening that allowed the applicant to move forward with the subject general plan amendment request. The request would change the land use designation from general commercial to mixed use. Currently, the only type of residential uses allowed under this existing designation are single-room occupancy units. The proposed mixed-use designation typically is but not single-family. This type of designation would not allow single-family or residential multifamily units. The proposed mixed-use designation is typically intended for both vertical and horizontal mixed-use developments that consist of commercial and very high-density residential development. The site would be considered a transitional area since it is surrounded by general commercial to the west and high-density residential to the east. The proposed 164 units would be more consistent with the high-density residential land use versus a very high-density residential land use. Under the residential very high designation, the site could have the potential of having a maximum capacity of 449 multifamily residential units. However, the applicant is proposing to maintain the existing zoning designation of commercial plan development and incorporate a specific plan overlay zone. The proposed specific plan would allow the 164 units that would be more compatible with the high-density residential designation. If the Planning Commission feels that the proposed density is appropriate, then the project-specific plan would allow the CPD SP zoning designation and the 164 units. The applicant is proposing a specific plan to address some of the challenges of the configuration and to allow more flexibility for developing the mixed-use project that would not normally be allowed under the Simi Valley Municipal Code standards. Some code standards would require higher density and additional commercial and open space. Based on the preliminary feedback from the surrounding residents at community meetings in December of last year, the applicant chose to move forward with the proposed density and design. The specific plan would establish design standards, design guidelines, outline the permitted build-out potential, and other regulations for the proposed site. As proposed, the specific plan would supersede the development standards of the Simi Valley Municipal Code and its design guidelines. The overall site plan shows the layout of the site. The 106 single-family detached residences are shaded in blue and green. Within the single-family areas, there are 54 two-story and 52 three-story residences. 8 of the 3-story homes will be live-work units and are highlighted in purple. 58 of the townhomes are shaded in gold and have a 2-story height. All the residential units would have private patio areas with 3 common recreational areas that are highlighted in purple. The applicant is also proposing a recreational area, also highlighted in purple, to provide more pedestrian interaction and social interaction. 3 food trucks would be allowed along with associated events. However, at this point, this area would only be limited to residents only unless a revised traffic study is submitted to accommodate this type of use. The applicant is proposing 491 residential parking spaces and 62 commercial parking spaces. The specific plan would establish the parking standards for the entire site and would comply with the proposed request as conditioned. Additionally, the applicant is proposing to install a pedestrian access gate to give on-site residents access to the adjacent shopping center near Trader Joe's, if granted by that property owner. This here shows the area of the proposed townhomes. And this is the design of how they would look. The overall height of the townhomes would be from between 25 feet to approximately 28 feet. This is a typical layout of the floor plans where all of the homes have a two-car garage with the living area on the first floor and the bedrooms on the second floor. This here shows how the door entries will be laid out. This is mixed up between having side entries and also for these homes here, for the townhomes, they will all have side entries. Some will be coming off of the private streets, and also off there's little common areas where they walk, where the garages are, and they walk up down this area. This provides a layout of where the two-story single-family units will be located. An example of what they'll look like. The typical square footage will range between 1,800 square feet to 2,200 square feet, with having the garage here and then a parking space behind it. It will be tandem parking, so guest parking would be able to park here, and you'd enter into the first floor where your living area is, and then the second floor would include your bedrooms and bathrooms. This also provides a synopsis of how the door areas would be laid out for the site. Some come off the private streets, and some come down the motor courts. This provides a layout of the three-story single-family area. And this also has similar height. They go up to 35 feet. They range between 1,700 to 1,800 square feet, roughly. And they also have a two-car garage where you walk in with the entry on the first floor. The living area and kitchen are up on the second floor, with the bedrooms up on the third floor. And this also shows the layout of where the door area entries would be. This shows the layout of the live-work area with the design. They are a similar height as the three-story units. And the only difference with the floor plan is it also has a two-car garage, but it also has a workspace area and the entry for clients to come into the business. And then on the second floor is their living area, and on the third floor would be their bedroom and bathroom area. And both door entries will be available off of Cochran Street and also on the interior side of the property. There's 2 rows of live-work units. And this is a layout of the retail area. And this is how it will look viewing from Cochran Street and on the interior portion of the site. This here is a rendering of all the optional residential recreation areas, which include a pool and children's play area, which is located on the western portion of the site, right adjacent to the Trader Joe's area. Then at the northeast corner, this will be a community garden for the residents to plant vegetables and have different farm-to-table type of events. And then, and also a bocce ball court, which will be located on the northeastern portion of the site. This consists of a layout of the commercial recreation area, which on the interior portion of the site, this is where the food trucks, up to 3 food trucks could be possibly allowed. That's what the specific plan is calling for. And then there's a lawn area to allow for accessory types of uses that kind of complement to the food trucks. The project request also include a proposed tentative parcel map, which will just subdivide the parcels for financial purposes. And the tentative tract map will subdivide the site for the residential lots, the common areas and streets, and the commercial property. The staff report contained 13 findings. And in order to have the project approved, all the findings had to be met, and which they have been and are in compliance with state and local laws. Also, as Mr. Peros mentioned, after the staff report was released, the applicant contacted us regarding some changes that they're requesting to the conditions of approval, which have been outlined in the supplemental staff report, and staff concurs with their request. We are, if the plan concurs with the project, staff recommends that that they recommend approval to City Council or one of the following options. Includes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Questions to staff? Commissioner Castleberry?
So typically, when we have a mixture of uses, we have a landscape buffer. And typically, what is our landscape buffer between residential and commercial?
It's 10 feet.
And between the McDonald's and the nearest part of this parcel, what is the buffer there?
There it ranges between 3 and 4 feet.
Okay.
Additional questions?
Well, I'll back up. I mean, they do have a 10-foot side yard, but then the wall and then a planter. The planter is 3 to 4, ranges 3 to 4 feet.
Okay, so between the property line and,
Between the property line and the driveway, it's a 3-foot planter.
okay.
Commissioner Rice?
So, Ms. Santos, the gate is a proposed gate. There's no agreement with the,
The applicant can explain a little bit further, but we did get an email from them that the adjacent property owner was interested in pursuing it, but.
I'm sorry, was that was or was not?
Was interested.
okay. And second question I have for you. According to Neighborhood Council number 3, this would generate 135 permanent jobs, but in the staff report, I saw that it would create 80 permanent jobs. Is it?
It's
Is
just,
there
it's
just
based on a
guess
nest,
or?
a guess, yes, depending on the type of the residential uses or retail uses that go into place in the also live work units.
Fair enough. Thank you.
From down here? Commissioner Tolson?
On the supplemental with the changes on page S26, it talks about applicant must design improvements such that proposed utilities are underground, and X'd out was existing. Does that mean there'll be a combination of poles up in the ground and then others that won't be?
So all the overhead utilities are on Cochran Street, and those are high voltage utilities. So it's not cost productive to put those underground because it's millions of dollars per per square, so many feet. So it obviously would. At the beginning of the project, it was confirmed that they did not have to underground utilities. They would remain in place, and I can show you a picture of that if you like. That's right. This is how, these are the overhead utilities. It would just, we confirmed with the applicant early on that they would not be required to underground these.
I actually have one more based upon that question. Jog my
Yeah, go right ahead.
So typically, I ask when we have a zone change if there's a public benefit that's included in this project. Are there any public benefits included in this project?
One of the conditions is to extend the fiber optics line up to Alamo Street.
Where is it currently end that?
I'd have to ask Public Works that question.
Okay, well, we can wait for Public Works to come up here later. Is there anything else though besides the fiber optic line?
No.
Okay.
Are there more homes?
Okay.
Any other questions? I have a couple. Ms. Santos, this is a small matter, but on page 3 of the staff report, I'm just kind of curious. The project is 12.83 acres. The residences would be on 10.87, and the remaining 1.09 acres would include the commercial. That adds up to 11.96. Is that just a, it seems like we've lost an acre there somehow. Is that just a math error, or am I missing something?
That was just a math error.
Okay, good. On page 4, I believe it's at the top full paragraph, there's a line in there that says, this has to do with level of service for traffic. And it says, the trips, I'm sorry, yes. Wait a minute, darn it.
Put your glasses on.
Ooh. Okay. It says, the analysis concluded that the traffic associated with the proposed project as conditioned will not result in any significant traffic impacts. What conditions have been in place that would impact traffic flow, traffic trips.
So that's the condition where it references a revised traffic report to include the commercial recreation area.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
That would be the condition of the revised traffic report to incorporate the commercial recreation area. And,
Oh, I see. So there was something that was undercounted, correct?
right,
And so assuming that that particular project is counted, as it
Right.
stands now, it meets the level of service A or better, or whatever's there, also B in some other locations.
as it stands now, if they were only to limit that area for residential use, then it would comply with the parking for the site. However, if they're intending to use it for commercial purposes, then they would need to submit a revised traffic study.
As I recall, the staff report referred to if they failed to do a traffic report, a modified traffic report, then they could not use that property except for persons who live on the property. Is that accurate?
Correct.
To be what?
For events, for family events, basically it would make it a challenging site.
Well, I take it that it not being approved for anything particular, it's going to be bare dirt until somebody either does a traffic report and then subsequently builds the anticipated use, or if they fail to do that, then the HOA would have the option to do the traffic report, or, well, they probably actually have to do it, or keep it internal, but they would have to do some sort of improvements, otherwise it would remain bare.
It could be improved in landscape, it just couldn't be used for commercial purposes.
Okay, I'm going to ask the developer to think of that question when they make their presentation.
Okay.
Okay. A little bit further down, talking about general plan amendment. I think I know the answer, but I want to be sure of this. It's my understanding that the definition of mixed use includes a definition of significant integration of multiple uses for the purposes of residential, employment, entertainment, et cetera. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, in this particular project, there's only 6,000 square feet versus the remainder of the project. Is that correct?
Correct.
There, I believe, and I want this on the record to make sure that my understanding of this is accurate, the commission and ultimately the council has the opportunity to find that the adjacent uses create an environment of mixed use so that these conditions of having this significant opportunity for employment, shopping opportunities, et cetera, are met, even though this particular project probably is significantly waning or lacking in a significant opportunity from these 6,000 square feet. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay. I like short, good answers. I like that. Okay. All right, so the developer is asking for high density, correct?
Correct.
Which is 10 to 20, 10.1 to 20. Is that accurate?
Right.
So we're looking at 12 and change if they only build it to 164. But if somebody else comes rolling in, say this project for whatever reason doesn't get built, and somebody else rolls in, then the project, if there were no affordable units present, they could be built up to 12.83 acres times 20, which is 256.6.
Correct.
Okay. And then, of course, if there were affordable units, they would have up to a 35% density bonus. Now we're looking at 346 units or thereabouts. I'm going to ask you to accept that. I did the math earlier. But that would be a proper calculation of maximum 20 times 35% if they had the density bonuses allotted by the state.
Right.
Okay, talking about the setbacks. And this sort of gets down to the question of the specific plan, and I'll ask you this question first. My understanding is the specific plan will supersede the design guidelines in the city. Is that accurate?
Yes.
All right. So in essence, if you want to have some particular design element that the design guidelines normally keep, you better darn well stick it in the specific plan, otherwise it doesn't need to be followed. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And we have the opportunity to impose that into the specific plan if we feel that before we approve the specific plan, we would want to see this particular guideline adhered to. Would that be true?
Yes, that'd be true.
Okay. So if, for example, one of the standard development guidelines that we have is a certain amount of ornamentation or a certain amount of 360-degree design elements, you know, from all sides. And we can take a look at some of the slides, you know, maybe at another time. But I'm looking at some of the slides, and there are several of those slides, particularly in the 3-story buildings, where it looked pretty sparse. And I'm not real sure. I mean, it just like, I love the color, and I like the apparent material that's being used, but otherwise it looks pretty darn bland. And these are going to be very visible buildings in the city from a number of different directions. And so would it be accurate that we would be able to add and talk to the developer about adding 360 architecture and some additional ornamentation?
Yes.
And have that included in the specific plan?
Yes.
No one has said yes to me this many times in my entire career. I want to talk about some of the, well, first of all, the live-work area. So there's ostensibly a building, I mean, a business in the first floor, and hopefully the person who runs that business is living upstairs. That's the idea, correct?
Correct.
How do we ensure that those those levels upstairs, the second and third floor, are used for living and not for storage for the business or for expanding the size of the business, the square footage?
I'll actually defer to the applicant for that question.
Okay. I'd like you to take a look at page 14, staff report. This has to do with some of the findings. I'm really perplexed at the end of finding number 1. I get the first paragraph, but I'll read this and maybe you could help me out to understand it. It says, the project is generally consistent with the above finding. However, the general plan, zoning consistency matrix, table LU, et cetera, shows that there is the compatible residential zoning districts for the mixed-use land use designation include the commercial office, commercial plan development, general industrial, light industrial, residential very high, and mixed-use zoning districts. It seems like the longest sentence fragment I've ever seen, because it says it, however, and then you never get to the blah, blah, blah. I mean, am I misreading this, or what is the meaning of this particular portion of the analysis?
The intent of it was to demonstrate there's a consistency, there's a land use consistency matrix that references it, and however this project is producing a residential high density. However, in the general plan, they can request a lower designation, and maybe Mr. Prose could elaborate a little bit further on this.
Yeah, it is a straight out of our general plan is where it's coming out of, and when we look at when we have our general plan land use map and our zoning map, we try to make sure those designations are consistent. So it's typically you'll see general commercial land use, general commercial plan development zoning. That's a very one-for-one linking. But when you do mixed use, it could either be commercial or residential or some other designations as well. And so in this case, the applicant is doing a mixed use general plan land use designation. They're putting a commercial plan development based zoning, and the project is essentially a residential project. So they have an overlay of specific plan on there. So with all those sorts of layers, we find that there is a way to make this a consistent finding that the general plan and the zoning match up and they are compatible.
Thank you. On number 2, on page 15, this is I think it was Commissioner Mann. I'm sorry, Rice. Well, whoever it was, somebody brought up the question about the 80 new permanent jobs. Yeah. Okay. I think I've mentioned this before. In order to make the analysis complete, this isn't new land that's being beamed down from somewhere, and I'm not trying to be glib, but this isn't new land that the city is annexing, and therefore we could turn it into something, and now it's in 80 additional new units and new jobs. This is property which is something, and it did used to have a whole bunch of jobs in it. And if that building was gone and it was repurposed, or rather it was purposed, not repurposed, but purposed for what it's currently zoned, that the city would anticipate that that project would generate a certain number of jobs. So that analysis is not in the staff report. We do analyze that apparently the live work and then the 6,000 square feet of new commercial opportunities will generate these 80 new jobs, but there's no analysis of what we could theoretically lose if this property was ultimately developed. I recognize it's been a long time, but I was thinking, well, it's been forever, and who's ever going to do that? But I was walking. I work downtown, and I was walking downtown the other day from my office off to the west, and it's just unbelievable the building that's going on down there, the new high-rise residential. Just everything. It's extraordinary. And if anybody had seen that area some years ago, they would have thought, they should just blow this up, and it'll never develop. But it did develop. So I don't want to spend too much time on it this time, but we should assume that if this property was built as its current designation, that it would generate probably more than 80 jobs. Would that be fair?
That'd be fair to say.
Okay. That's right. The last question, well, I wanted to get into this question of permitted uses for the live work stuff. That was on page 121, as I recall. It's actually on page 1, maybe it was on 121 and somebody took some stuff out. It's actually on pages 119 and 120. So some of the permitted uses are business support services. Can you give me some examples of what business support services would be?
Like a FedEx copy center, a seamstress, a dry cleaning service, business support services. I can provide a better definition in the development code if you give me a moment, but
Okay.
usually those are the general services.
Also, small family daycare. Are there some parameters to that?
Small family daycare is up to, I believe, six.
8 or fewer.
I'm sorry?
8 or fewer.
8 or fewer.
8 or fewer children.
So if you have a mom that wants to open up a daycare, she could do it down in the live work area.
There's another one that's kind of broad. It says repair services.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. After a small family service at daycare, you have personal services, including hair and nail salons, photography studio, and then repair services. What are repair services limited to?
That'd be for like appliance repairs. The applicant could probably provide a little bit more elaboration on that, but my assumption would be like appliance repair.
Some of these, the reason I'm bringing this up is they seem a little broad.
Right.
And I hate to see somebody make a use out of repair services, like, for example, and I think that I don't know if we have a conditional use permit for this, but somebody comes in and starts wanting to repair motorcycles. I don't know that we would want that in there or think that that's a proper use. Just a thought. And then the last question, I'm not even going to ask the question. Those are the remaining of my questions. Does anybody have any follow-up questions?
I do.
Mr. Tolson?
In your report, you mentioned that the property could have up to 449 units. What would be the condition that would happen?
That would be if it had a residential very high designation. So
Which
they're not proposing. They're proposing more of a residential high designation.
Why'd you leave it in there? Why'd you have that then if they're not asking for that?
That's the intent of the mixed use zone. The mixed use land use designation that's one of the compatible land use designation or zoning designations is to incorporate a residential very high density, and also our development code and the mixed use standards. They also call for mixed use or mixed residential very high density types of projects. However, with them proposing the specific plan, that these types of standards would supersede that, and that would allow them to have the 164 units and single family and multifamily units.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just turn my button on. Did you ever discuss putting in a meandering sidewalk rather than, especially along Galena, rather than just the straight sidewalk?
No, that wasn't discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we will open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Would the applicant like to present the project?
Yes, please.
Okay. You have 15 minutes.
Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Tim Ram. I'm here with the applicant and the property owner to present our project to you this evening. As you can see here, we're calling it the Enclave. This shows the site. Jennifer covered this a little bit. It's 12.8 acres. It's very transitional.
I beg your pardon, and I apologize for interrupting. If I could impose upon you to refer to her as Ms. Santos, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, no problem.
All right, thank you very much.
The site's very transitional in nature because of the commercial uses to the west. There's a Trader Joe's, Target, Lassen's, Orange Theory, Starbucks is over there. Great adjacencies make it very attractive to us, certainly, and it will be attractive to a lot of residents because it's so walkable. All of these factors really make it a great housing site, and then you have the single-family detached homes to our east, so it's really nestled in between the two more intense commercial uses to the west and south, and the single-family residential right across Galena Avenue. This is the existing building. She touched on this as well. It's about 271,000 feet. It's been vacant for over 4 years. The prior owner actually lost it to his lender in a foreclosure. He tried desperately with a couple of different brokerages to release the building, and it's really functionally obsolescent. He had no takers, and unfortunately, the lender foreclosed on it. So it's been an eyesore in town for quite some time, and a lot of our neighbors are interested in attending the implosion ceremony, but I don't think you can do that in California here. Again, another larger view of the retail adjacencies, 71 acres. So when we first met with the city, they indicated a desire to support the existing commercial and retail here in the city center. And we've all heard of the retail apocalypse, the Amazon effect, and there's really a desire here to support all of that existing commercial retail. So what this proposal does is provide much needed high quality housing, proximate and really walkable to all of those great uses, and that'll support the local businesses, retailers, and restaurants. People shop where they live. That's been proven time and again. So as staff also indicated, the city, in about the next sentence, go try to support the local retail and commercial, also said go meet with your neighbors very early and do that often. So we did that in December before we even owned the property, and mailed out notice to all of the residents to the east of us. There were some residents included south of Cochran and then also north of the Ronald Reagan Freeway. So we presented a variety of plans that ranged in size and scale, density, a mix of some for sale and for rent. There was more commercial, less commercial, a variety of options, and densities from about 285 units up to about 425 units. And the neighbors were absolutely crystal clear in their opposition to high-density housing, affordable housing, and those were the first comments that came out at that meeting. They were very adamant that this be a for-sale site to help support their values across the street, that it would be more compatible if it was for sale compared to their single-family detached immediately across the street from us, and then there's some condominiums over there also. So concerns about schools, traffic, parking, and also too much retail in the area, seeing some of the vacancies. So we went back to the drawing board, and at our general plan pre-screen meeting in January in front of the City Council, planned the site based on feedback from our neighbors. This is the plan that we showed at that City Council meeting here. It has 100% for sale housing, 3 different product types. We indicated at that meeting the density would be between 150 to 165 homes here on the site. As you can see in the orange on the screen, the 2-story single-family detached is meant to be respectful of the 2-story single-family detached directly across Galena. And then the density increases as you move to the west with the 2-story townhomes and 3-story single-family detached. The commercial uses are contained down along Cochran Street. We received unanimous approval of this plan and the proposal at that January meeting in front of the city, and so moved forward to purchase the property in March and then submitted our formal site plan application right at the end of April here. And as you can see here, it's very similar to what we showed previously at the general plan pre-screen meeting. And it has the single-family detached homes out on Galena, the townhomes to the north and west of that. You can see our amenity center, then the 3-story detached, just where we had indicated previously with the live, work, and retail down along Cochrane. So very, very similar to what we showed and had approval for back in January. So we'll get into a little bit more of this. We have our architect here and site planner, and I'll have him introduce some of the great aspects of this land plan to you. All of the homes have 2-car direct access garages, as Ms. Santos indicated. We have a couple of spine streets with sidewalks on each side and street parking. So Alan Scales is here this evening, and he'll be articulating a little bit more about the plan and the architecture. The plan is really well conceived because the housing stock in Simi Valley is largely the same. It's about 75% of your homes are single-family detached on large lots. Very little of it is attached housing. And the other thing that really stands out is the housing stock here is fairly old. Most of it's been built before 1990, about 75% of that, only 1% in the last 10 years. So this is going to be very attractive, this for-sale housing, because it's not your typical Simi Valley product, and it's also going to be new. So there are quite a few units that are renter-occupied, about 12,000 of them, and then a fairly significant development pipeline for apartments. So we really think this is the missing middle housing. It provides some unique products here to the market that you don't actually have, which will attract a variety of buyers, such as millennials, young families, first-time buyers, empty nesters, certainly some move-down buyers, all of them seeking attainably priced housing. So with that, I'll turn this over to Alan Scales, our architect with KTGY.
Thank you, Tim. Again, my name is Alan Scales, principal and architect with KTGY. Excited to share with you tonight our design concept and some of the features and influences that led us to our design. I'd like to start with the site plan. And the influences, of course, begin with the Cochrane frontage. We felt appropriate to continue the commercial look and feel with our live, work, homes, and the retail and mixed-use plazas along that edge. And then slowly moving with housing prototypes that step down, as was previously stated, along the Galena frontage to mimic the 2-story existing homes on the opposite side. Internally, we really looked at focusing the attention to the hierarchy in our street pattern. So there's a strong axis both east-west as well as north and south that allows us to distribute and bring pedestrians in. So we envision tree-lined streets, parallel guest parking throughout, distributing those guest parking spaces throughout the project site itself, but also connecting from entry point to our primary pool area, as well as secondary common open spaces, and of course our mixed-use plaza and retail center to the south. So that's very important to us. It has a big impact to how we design the homes, and we've laid out the rest of the property itself, discreetly locating garages on smaller auto courts. We do not have garages loading to the street. We have front doors to these homes fronting the street, so we're activating that space by way of guest parking and activity moving to the front doors of those homes. We have a mix of building types here, as previously stated, prototypes from 2- and 3-story, 2-story attached, 2-story detached, but in 10 different plan types, various building types. We are looking at various architectural themes, up to 7 color schemes to add diversity to the street scene itself. Highlighting our primary recreation area, we have a series of spaces from a tot lot for younger children, multi-purpose lawn, and of course our resort-style pool area, cabanas, barbecue, trellis, as a primary feature to our community. The next secondary open space is more intimately scaled. The intent is to provide contrast to the pool area with bocce ball court, as well as outdoor fire pit and seating areas. But again, a little smaller scale. We are looking at string lights to add ambiance to that space, as well as lots of landscaping. And then, of course, our mixed-use plaza. The vision here is a community space that could be sort of movie in the park night, food truck, access to that space. Again, a community feature. And then, of course, immediately adjacent to our retail building with the vision in the retail is really dining focus and connectivity to the larger sized dining, outdoor dining experience. The following slides will be a bit of a walking tour through the project site, starting with the Galena frontage. You see the two-story detached homes. We looked very carefully at creating lots of plane changes in the architecture, some one-story elements, as well as these deep-set plane changes. But very important, as you see through the various slides, is the landscape. It's very important that that adds a complementary touch and is a foreground element to the ultimate experience as you walk through the site. This is entering in off of Galena, our primary entry with pool area as a terminus view at the end, deliberately located directly at the end. Tree-lined street, pedestrian access. You can see guest parking on either side of the street. So giving a neighborhood feel with front doors facing that street, along with some articulation in the facade, bay window treatments with contrasting colors, one-story roof elements, etc. The two-story detached homes shown here show a little variety in the architecture, different window sizes, details, roofing materials and colors animate the facade, accent colors at front doors, different detail at the front door here, looking at an arched entryway with a variety of detail to designate entry. The two-story townhomes have a similar feel. We very deliberately located entries to our townhomes on the short ends of the buildings to front that main street, if you will. So we're putting entries on multiple sides of a townhome building. You'll see the paseo leads to additional entries as well as the private open spaces as well. As you look through, you'll see the articulation in the wall plane, a little bit of color, some one-story elements as well. The primary pool area, again highlighted as a central focus here, has two-story townhome to the right. You'll see the color in the wall moves the architecture, it highlights the plane changes and one-story elements, and then the three-story detached homes similarly have two-story roof lines. As you can see here, as was previously mentioned, entry doors facing the public street. These homes have been very popular through and very successful through many other communities in LA and Orange County, provide a compact, efficient footprint to really deliver an attainable price for the homeowner, future homeowners. The live-work homes, of course, have a lot of articulation in the facade, but really emphasized at the base or the first floor of the building. Really the vision here is a shopkeeper type unit. The intent would be a small home business with their own personal living quarters above, and again, small professional office or something of that nature is the intent. But of course, with the larger expanses of glass, we're looking at connecting to the streets as well as the mixed-use plaza and the retail dining experience immediately adjacent, which can be highlighted here in this slide. You'll see our retail building is designed for flexibility. Could be one large user, it could be several smaller users, but with a dining focus. Experiential dining has been very popular, and that is really by way of its adjacencies, the outdoor dining spaces, creating ambiance and usable spaces that bleed in and outside of the building itself. So you get large expanses of glass that connect that outdoor dining to the building itself. And then finally, our Cochrane frontage, you'll see the mixed-use plaza. Access is provided from the Cochrane frontage for the pedestrian. Live-work units would be off to the left, and then four-sided architecture for the retail building itself with signage, lighting, and a variety of materials. With that said, I'd like to pass it back for Tim to conclude. Thank you.
So we'll wrap it up here quickly. It's a transitional site, as we indicated, so housing in this location makes great planning sense. It's smart growth. It's developing an infill site or redeveloping an infill site instead of a hillside or an open space, which is smart. We're removing the eyesore that's been in the community for quite some time and replacing it with a vibrant, walkable, mixed-use community. People shop where they live, so we're providing new residents and new spending to support all of the adjacent retail at the direction of the city. And then certainly because it's so walkable, it reduces traffic trips, which I think everybody is in favor of these days. Very little of Simi's housing stock has been built recently, so there's going to be deep demand for this for sale housing here that's high quality, attainably priced, and low maintenance. So the unique product types are going to be attractive to a variety of buyers here. Millennials, young families, empty nesters, move-down buyers, as we've indicated. So, lastly, the fees are significant here. That we're going to be providing about $4.5 million for park fees, traffic, schools, et cetera. And then the property taxes are pretty low right now. At build-out, this will be going up 5 times, which is really a great benefit to the local schools, but obviously the city and county as well. So this is the vote record so far with the general plan pre-screen and the unanimous approval. Neighborhood Council 3 last month. The representatives were unanimous in their support. The audience was very supportive of us at that meeting. And I think really these results show that we have the right project in the right location here, and people really appreciate that. So with that, I'll wrap it up. We have our consultant team here tonight. We're happy to answer any questions that you all may have of us, and appreciate your listening. Thanks.
Questions of the applicant? Commissioner Castleberry?
So what are the price ranges we're looking at for the single-family homes and the townhomes?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, commissioners, staff, and members of the public. Mark Kerslake, also with the applicant. We're going to tag team the Q&A if that's okay.
That's fine.
So the townhomes would start, there would probably be a developer price of $395, $399 for the townhomes, and then it would graduate up into the 6s as we got into the single-family detached homes.
And do we have any idea about what the HOA dues are going to be for the homes?
Approximately $200, roughly.
Also, so the interior two-story single-family detached houses along Galena, I noticed that the front doors are the same size as the garages. Is there going to be pedestrian walkways from those front doors across all the garages down to the main streets?
Yes, sir. There's a concrete band that goes down the motor court. And then the end units, as Ms. Santos indicated, the end units have front doors that face the spine road.
Okay.
Other questions?
The live-work areas, there's 8 units.
Yes, sir.
4 are really the ones that are facing Cochrane. The other 4 are like hidden. You have the first 4 on Cochrane are visible. And the other 4 are like, you'd have to know to go there. Am I right?
Sorry, I was just trying to get back there.
Yeah. Bottom left.
Tech support. Give me a minute, laser. Sorry about that.
No, yeah.
Technical issues. Yes, sir. So 8 right here, correct. 4 would.
Those 4 face Cochrane.
Correct.
Who's going to know about those other 4?
Well, they'll all be marketed that way as live-work units. So some people might like the exposure of Cochrane, depending on the type business they have. Like a CPA, for instance, maybe would like that.
It's interesting. One was an insurance, and that got my excitement.
Exactly, right. So the insurance agent may or may not want exposure on Cochrane. It might.
I would. I mean, they would.
Then we have one for you. We have one for you.
But on the backside, it's negligible.
Less visible, but also quieter for someone.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Any solar aspect in any of these units?
The new state law would require solar on all homes.
Okay. And the pool area that you've got planned there, the discussion earlier was that it would be guaranteed built, or it has to go through some other traffic studies to be completed?
No, thank you. If I could speak to that, I think there's a little bit of confusion over that.
Yeah.
No, that's part of our project. It's in our site plan. We intend to build it. We want to build it. The area where there's a little bit of confusion is this multi-purpose lawn.
Got it, okay.
We went through a very detailed traffic study. We studied 15 intersections. That's the most intersections we've ever studied on a project in our 30-year history. It was a very thorough traffic study. Your city traffic engineer's point was, and it was a fair point, this area, which is maintained by the HOA for the use of the residents, the trips associated with that are built into the trips generated by the project. Therefore, you couldn't have an outside function, like we couldn't have a flea market, let's say, open to the public on that site that would require a special permit or a supplemental study. The other area, and sometimes these get confused, is this area. So we have the 6,000-foot, mainly dining-focused retail building. On the north side of it is a 4,000-foot outdoor retail dining plaza. That's all open to the public, and that's all included in the traffic study. So the point was, if this ever became a public use, that would require a supplemental study or a special use permit.
Perfect.
Did
Last
I
question
answer
for me
that?
is,
Okay.
some of your parking on your units have a staggered
Yes.
2 garages, 2 doors, and it shows like covered or just you parking behind that garage door. How many units have that?
Yes, sir. The single-family residential, which I think there are 54 of those. So to create a little more interesting street scene, you can probably see the little notch right there. I could blow it up if you like. The garages are staggered. It's a 2-car garage, but they're staggered so that we get a full-length driveway in front of 1-car garage so that a guest could park on the site, on the lot of that home.
So that's how those parking spots are counted, by having, I could be in the garage and then my guest would be
Could
parked
park
behind me.
in your own driveway.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That was it for me.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
This property, this little section down here that seems to be drawing so much attention because of traffic issues or traffic failure to count or over-counting or however you decide to count it. And then it's available for anybody who's walking by because it's open to the street, correct?
Correct.
And the HOA has to maintain it.
Correct.
I'm just looking at the cost benefit of that little segment, and I just say repurpose it. I mean, have you thought about how to repurpose it to be something different so you can avoid all these problems?
Well, the reason we did it, and hopefully it's evident on the land plan, we tried to create these strong access points. So when you come in, you have a nice tree-lined street with sidewalks on both sides, and it terminates at this. So you have a nice sense of visual acuity. When you go north, same thing. Your eye ends at a common rec facility. And then likewise, as you come south, your eye goes to this instead of a building. So we were trying to create that visual sense on those 2 axes, and also trying to break up the frontage along Cochrane by having that break there. I suppose you could add other live work units, just one more there and one more there, and that would take up some of it. But we actually thought it gave some relief to the street scene and gave an area for the community to use for community HOA meetings, HOA functions. It could be a Memorial Day barbecue, 4th of July party, a community
I'm just
event.
wondering how somebody who's traveling by, lives in the area, doesn't think that this is a little pocket park that anybody can use for any purpose, et cetera. I just see, maybe I'm looking too deep into it, but it just seems to me like a bit of an issue.
Well, if you wanted us to gate it, we could gate it and have the key fobs that make it accessible for the residents. We'd be happy to do that.
Okay. I had asked a little bit earlier about some questions about, I heard the architect, make the comment about 360 architecture, and maybe in certain places it's true, but in a lot of places I don't think it comes close.
And we'll pull that up. And the areas that you're referring to where they often had a dashed line on the elevations, do we have an exhibit on the elevations?
If you could pull up the 3
Yeah,
stories, that's more most glaring.
May we pull that up?
All by all means.
Okay.
What's on Ms. Santos's presentation?
Do we have elevations? Imagery?
That's not it. No,
Ah,
that's
here we
not
go.
it. Nope, that's not it. That's the front. I'm looking at the back or the side.
Well, that's the side, actually, I believe is your concern.
Well, that's, okay, there you
So
go.
that.
I mean,
Well, that-
look at the one on the rear elevation. That's frightening. And maybe that's frightening may be a little strong. It's frightening. I mean, I look at that and I think, come on.
That, you think is frightening?
That is dull as dirt. I mean, that is not good. I mean, I look at that and I think, the way that's going to line up, these things are going to be very close together. It's not like there's just a few of them and there's going to be trees, and there's room for a landscaping that's going to soften anything like this. This is what it's going to look like. And it's going to look like it a whole bunch of times in repetition. And if you don't do something to put any kind of ornamentation next to the windows, I look at that and I think, wow.
Well, the windows all do have surrounds around them.
Well, you have pop-outs, and they're very, apparently, and they look to be very bland by comparison, so there's almost no contrast. There's some, and even the one on the side, on the lower right,
Yes.
and the one on the motor court side of it, I mean, those windows, it looks unfinished. And I look at that and I think, because it's going to repeat so frequently, and it's going to be so visible. This is not property that's hidden in some corner of the city. This is right in the center of the city, and this is going to be, everybody wants this to work. We want it to work, and we certainly don't want anything to look, blight is the wrong word, unfinished and not the way it should be if you really wanted to make this an example of good architecture for the city.
Sure. I agree with you, and we thought we achieved that. I'll let the architect.
Yeah, certainly open to that discussion. Just as we pointed out through the presentation, what was important to us are the edges that you see from the public point of view. So there are some areas where the buildings do get closer. There isn't as much attention to that space. And so we did look at, oops, I don't have my clicker on. So the top right, these are the sides that are facing out. That's an example of it. There's several others that show more movement, two-story roof lines and attention to detail.
Well, think of the properties that are on the west side of the property, that everybody who parks at Target is going to look over and see this.
Sure.
And they're going to look at that one at the lower right-hand side and go, it's just going to look like a big old wall of white.
We have the entry side of the home facing the Target. So if you look at, I don't know if you have the other.
Let's pull up.
Yeah, you have that. We have another exhibit we're going to pull up
Exhibit
quickly.
23. We have lots of exhibits, sorry. We thought about the Target side. Here it is. This is the before, obviously. You have a big, ugly, 6-story brown building with foreboding skies, which we didn't put in. And this is the after. That's a huge improvement.
Yeah, it's lovely because you got all those trees between the front of the Target and the building.
Even just like some tile or a Juliet balcony here and there or something like that.
Something.
Just,
Something consistent with the architecture, which I frankly like very much.
Yeah.
Faux shutters. I mean, something to make it look like it would be consistent.
I think.
And don't try to fool me with this one. I mean.
But I just did.
Well, sorry. We went to great lengths to try and get the trees right. We really did. You could see the trees there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We went through this, the eucalyptus. You can see the trunk of that tree. That's on the Target side. That's not our tree.
Mm-hmm.
That's on our site. That isn't. We tried to go through great lengths to get that, to try and get this right. Those are the 3-story, and then that's our rec facility, so there aren't any homes here to here. And then that's where the townhomes start, and then the townhomes from there on are to the left of that Trader Joe's that you can see.
I think I've made my position clear, and I have a few more questions. I don't want to dwell too long on this. What about the control? I asked the question a little bit earlier, and staff deferred to you about control of the living areas above the live-work environment.
That's a good question. That would actually really be no different than any single-family home if somebody operated a business where they weren't supposed to. That could happen in any resident in town. Here, that's not a permitted use. The specific plan is clear that those uses are only allowable on the ground floor. might someone store things upstairs? Yes. I mean, realistically.
And we don't want the city to have to make that effort. So my question to you is that area covered by the HOA? Is that part of the HOA?
The use restrictions for the ground floor?
For the second and
Yes.
third floors?
Yes, and the city, one of the conditions is, as usual, the city has the right to approve the CCNRs, so we'd be happy to fold that into the CCNRs.
It would seem appropriate that the homeowners association would be the first, line of defense.
Correct. That's a good
And
idea.
they should have the authority to, come to them and say, you're not using this properly.
Yes, sir, that's a good idea.
Okay. All right, the commercial, what about, one of the things that I didn't ask staff earlier was freeway noise considerations, and that would fold into issues of the retail use noises, the retail use noises to the west. So you've got, some of these folks going to be looking at the glorious back of Trader Joe's and some other areas, and having worked at a grocery store as a kid, I know how nice those areas can look. And you also have noise issues. So do you have, in that area, do you have sufficient space to allow trees and other kinds of screening, natural landscape screening, so to minimize the impacts of overlooking the back of those businesses?
Yes. Yes, sir, we believe we do, and I can address that for you. A couple of things before I forget, and Commissioner Castleberry asked about this. At McDonald's, by the way, this is our PL, not here. We own this gray 30-foot driveway. We own that, and the McDonald's has an easement over it. So our setback is actually over 40 feet. It's the edge of that home to that line, not there. It's not there to there. So our setback is closer to 40 feet around the McDonald's. There's a planter and then the yard of those homes. So I just want to clarify that. And then there's a 10-foot landscape buffer going up the entire side here. And there are no loading docks here. There's one small roll-up door about there, which is not as wide as that screen. And we also have a 10-foot buffer there against the post office, and a 10-foot buffer there, which is the city requirement. And then we have an 8-foot wall up here, a lot of dense landscaping here between us and the freeway. Then there's an 8-foot masonry wall, and then there's landscaping on the other side of that, on our side of the wall, and that's a 20-foot setback. So it's 10, 40, 10, 10, 10, 20.
Okay, I'm not sure that answered my question, though. I asked you the question, if there is, on the west side, if there's sufficient space and plans to put landscaping that will soften the view from those units and the back of the building right next to it on the west side.
Well, I'm sorry, I thought I did. That's the 10-foot
It's right,
landscape.
but it's 10 feet. Is that enough? And what do you plan to plant there?
Yes. Well, 10 feet, as Ms. Santos indicated, that's your standard buffer. And we have, there's a requirement for our landscape plan to be approved. So we'll plant that however you wish to plant it. And 10 feet is the standard dimension.
Okay.
As long as it's not crepe myrtles, right?
Okay. That's done. Oh, it's difficult to tell from here, but these areas right there,
Yes,
are
sir.
are those essentially common areas, or are those?
No.
They're not yards.
No, sir, they are private yards.
They're private yards.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. So the access point is here, and these are actually private yards. And
I do have a close-up diagram if you wanted to see that.
not necessarily. Are those areas separated, unit to unit?
Yes.
What are they
There's
separated by?
property line that runs up here, 10 minimum, and then at these notches it goes to more like 30.
Okay, what are they
And then
separated by?
10, pardon?
Do you have a wall, a fence? Is it like New Jersey where everybody's yard just goes one into another?
No, there are walls and fences separating all of them. We have 10 feet between homes, which is the same that you see here on Galena. These are 0 lot line homes, 10 feet apart. These are 10 feet apart. Similar, same separation. And there are side walls and fences, and again, I do have a blow-up if you'd like to see it. There are walls that contain those private yards.
I know, I believe that. I think that we need to, push on. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds. The last question I have for you is, who's building this?
Pardon?
Who is building this?
Well, we work with a variety of the home builders, the national home builders. We typically act as the master developer. Excuse me. So most of the national home builders we partner with and work with.
And it's your expectation that you, with the utilization of your partners, are going to build this project?
Correct.
When would you expect to start?
Well, that's going to be
I'm sorry,
up to the
hope
city.
To start. Hope to start.
Well, we would obviously hope that we get our approvals in the not too distant future, and then we're going to begin starting processing our demolition permit now. We have already discussed with staff advancing processing the demolition permit so that we could get a jump on that once, hopefully, knock on wood, our land use approvals are granted.
Very good. I have no further questions. Are there any questions of the commission? Very good. Thank you very much.
No, well, I do.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Sorry.
I'm being quiet over here all night.
Yes, sir.
And this may be for staff, I'm not really sure which one. Was there a noise study done, and is there one required?
Yes and yes. It's required, and we did it.
Okay. The freeway combining overlay, and now it looks like somehow we've created something called a noise protection zone. It looks like, and I'm not an expert in this, but the noise level for the noise protection zone seems higher than what it would be allowed if it was just a standard residential project. I'm kind of easy on the question as to who it goes to.
That's correct.
By how many, what's the difference in the decibels or the CNELs or whatever it is? How much difference is there between what would be allowed on a normal project and what they're asking for here?
A normal project, not adjacent to the freeway, would be 63 CNEL versus 65, which they're asking for.
Okay, so not a major significant increase.
3 is not perceptible. The difference in 3 dB is not perceptible, according to our acoustic engineer.
Okay. That answers that. My only question. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, did you want me to answer your earlier questions about
If there's something that you think that I failed, yes,
mixed
go right
use?
ahead.
Okay. Derek? Just stay here. we have a lot of exhibits. Go to pull up. Get ready for 12, but let me cover a couple things first. Mixed use, the mix of uses. The general plan does not stipulate and I'll get to density in a moment, but just to clarify, the general plan mixed use designation does not specify a minimum. There's no minimum number of uses or percentages or anything like that. And we do think we have a mixed use project. We have at least 5 to 7 uses. We have 3 different housing types. We do have live-work units. We have the 6,000-foot retail building. We have a 4,000-foot dining plaza, and we have 3 to 4 dedicated recreation areas. So I think we have up to 7 mixed uses, depending on how you count them. But importantly, the general plan contains no minimum requirement on the mix of uses. So I wanted to discuss that. And then there is some confusion, I think, in the staff report on density. This is the slide I showed on January 28 to the council, where we told them it would be 150 to 165 for-sale units. We're before you tonight with exactly that plan. That was also referenced in the bubble plan that we showed on the evening of the 28th. When we met with the city initially, we were told to put rooftops here to support the 71 acres of retail that we adjoin. A lot of retail is struggling, as we all know, due to the retail apocalypse, as they call it, and the Amazon effect. So the direction we got was to put housing here. It wasn't to put office here. It wasn't to put retail here. It was to put housing here to provide new residents for new spending to support the 71-acre retail complex. We followed precisely the direction we got from City Council on January 28th. And subsequently have had a number of successive votes. As discussed, an SP overlay is allowed in any jurisdiction. Your municipal code 928060 provides for that.
I beg your pardon. Could I ask you to, I don't think I asked these specific questions. If I could ask you to reserve this until you respond later to the comments made during open,
yes, sir.
It would probably be better.
I was trying to answer your question.
Well, I get it, but, I don't know that I asked those questions. It's okay, and I appreciate your trying to be very.
I'm almost done with this.
That's okay. Let's push on. Thank you very much.
All right. You can close that out.
Okay, I have a number of cards. Cindy Toth. You have 5 minutes. 5 whole minutes.
Just close that. That's all.
Unless you know how to dance.
Was it 3 or 4?
I'll get out of here.
No, it's fine.
No worries, no worries.
There's not that many.
Hi, all. I'm a resident just 2 streets over from this development. I did come to I've been to every single meeting that these gentlemen have provided for us. Initially, when they did come to us saying that they want a lot of higher density, me not only as a resident that's living 2 streets over, I'm also a realtor. So I know a lot of the needs of our community because I sell and work here and buy here. But anyway, I see this and what they changed because what they did absolutely listen to what we asked for. And they came out with the new plan, and then I really see it being better and better for our housing values for us that are in the 1980 homes across the way. As far as our housing values, having these come in at the price point that they're coming in at, because I also see a lot of other people needing that, $395. Entry-level home. Still, I look at the square footage on that and know that that's a very good square footage for that price. Let me think, what else did I have in my little notes here? The building currently is very much an eyesore. I know, I walk over to Target on a regular basis and stuff like that. Every now and then you get people that will sleep in that parking lot, before they put the big fence up, it was really prevalent, which made it kind of scary for us. Let me think here. I really do feel that it is, what they've come up with now is the best use for that property. We don't need another commercial building that's not going to house anybody. And that one was so dated. I've been in there. Were you in there? It was really bad before they moved out. And then just a lot of problems inside that building. So I know from just being around it, So thank you. I'm in support.
Very good. Thank you. Gerald Holta? I beg your Gerald. Is Gerald here? Who wishes to speak? Could be. It looks like Gerald. And then Holtz? Holtz, maybe? All right. Well, anyway, Gerald, if you show up again, we'll call you at the end. Pat Merchant?
Good evening, thank you. I'm opposed to the project. I'm not opposed to the zoning change. We do need high density. I don't think single-family homes that are owner-occupied is something the city needs. I don't think that'll support the businesses. There's a lot of floundering businesses across the street, and we really need affordable housing and workforce housing. So I'm more inclined to want to see apartments go in there. Cochrane is a bus line for the city and the county. So it's a perfect place for the housing that we really need in the city, which is more affordable renters for people, for the workforce that's here, and for young people. I don't think that housing that goes between $400,000 and $600,000 is really something the millennial can afford, or a senior. So as I say, I'm for increasing the density, but not in this way. I don't think we need more owner-occupied space. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina Boylans?
I live in the area for about 2 years, and I shop in the area next door every week. I support this project and urge you to vote yes to approve it. I am excited to see an all-for-sale housing project. I know I'm short, I'm sorry. I'm excited to see an all-for-sale housing project be developed here instead of high-density apartments, and think that for-sale housing is a much better fit for this location and for Simi Valley in general. Homeowners bring a sense of pride to a community, bring up our property values, and have less turnover than renters. It will be great for the city to get rid of the existing building, which has been vacant for a long time, and finally redevelop the site, which is a nice addition to our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Athena Smith?
Good evening. As a resident of Simi Valley, I strongly support the project consisting of all for sale homes at the above property. The property has sat vacant for too long and needs to be redeveloped. I do not want a 4-story, high-density apartment complex like Tapo and Alamo being constructed. Please do what is best for Simi Valley and approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Alexandra Garnon?
So I am in full support of this. I have friends also that have been looking for new affordable housing. They're a young family, can't find it. A lot of things are old. They don't want to fix things up because they do have young kids. That's just my addition to my other. I urge you to approve the project at 3039 Cochrane. I don't want to end up with low-income or high-density housing at this site. I do not want a large apartment project at this site. The developer proposed that option in December at the neighborhood meeting, and the neighbors are strongly opposed to it, as am I. I'm glad that the developer listened to us, and I hope that you do too. I'm full support of the application for 164 units that have been submitted at the size for more suited in Simi Valley community and the homes across Galena Avenue. This will be a great addition to help support all of our local stores and restaurants, and homeowners will provide more spending power than renters. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel Lewis?
Good evening. I support the project. I believe that for-sale housing at this location is better for our community than apartments. Owners will spend money here that has been covered. The people that live here will spend money here. I love living in Simi Valley. It's a small family neighborhoods, which statistics have shown that it leads to our youth having stronger character values and character traits, which leads to our youth having which builds a brighter future for our children in support of the project.
Thank you. Sean Fuchs?
Hello. I'd like to let you know that I support this proposal plan at the Enclave project located at 3039 Cochrane Street. We need a better mix of new types of housing in our city, and this is a perfect place to start. The proposed homes would be great start homes for people new to the city, as well as our children that have had to move further away due to the lack of available starter homes that currently exist in Simi Valley. Hopefully this will be a great alternative to the larger homes that dominate Simi Valley and make it easier for first-time homeowners to buy in our city. Please approve the Enclave project. Thank you.
Thank you. Danielle Fuchs? Do you know Sean?
Unfortunately. I support the proposal for 164 for-sale homes with 6,000 square feet of retail, the above property. Currently, our city does not have enough new high-quality housing options, and this would be a great addition. Right now, I'm currently a renter in Simi Valley and would be very interested in possibly purchasing a home, especially at this location near the Trader Joe's and Starbucks, which I'll be able to walk to. I like that these are not large lots, so I'll have less maintenance. Please approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Jared Garnon, or Garnod.
How you doing? Thank you for your time. I'm excited about this project and fully support it. With all the proposed apartment buildings in the works right now, I think for sale housing is perfect for our town. I'm really excited about the live-work home idea. I own a small business that I do run out of my house, and I think a small designated area for that would be great. Being that they're next to retail, I think it's great because we do shop where we live, and hopefully that will reduce traffic. I support this, and I hope you guys vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil Lewis?
Good evening, everybody. In case you're dying to know, the Dodgers are up 3-1 in the 7th, so hopefully...
I was recording that, and I didn't want to know.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, we don't know the end result yet, so I didn't spoil that. So I want to thank the developers for the hard work they've done on this project and trying to take into account the citizens around the area, their perspective. Obviously, it's an upgrade. Thank you. I am a little bit taller than she was, but I appreciate the intent. But I do have some major reservations. For one, as a millennial myself, the idea that these are attainable for millennials is questionable. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 55% of millennials in Southern California in this area still live with their parents. Okay? The need for most millennials in this area is a place that they can get out of their parents' basement and live in a place that they can rent for a reasonable amount. Second, I disagree with the density decision. I know many people have concerns about apartments, but there are some misconceptions about apartments. Contrary to popular belief, apartment areas actually have less crime and bring in more revenue to cities than single-family area homes or condos. But what really concerns me about this project is that it falls woefully short of the number of units that we need to reinvigorate the economic prospects of that area and to make any sort of serious headway towards meeting our RENA numbers that were released by the state. So Simi Valley is supposed to plan for the construction of 1,256 homes by 2021, according to RENA. This number was devised to help us ease the burden of housing costs on our citizens and to meet this region's housing demands. We do not have a ton of available space to build. Getting this project right is paramount. Third, not only are we nowhere close to meeting the RENA number, but we're even worse when it comes to hitting our affordable housing targets. This doesn't provide that at all. This project, from what I could tell, at least that's what I heard, doesn't have any affordable housing units. The project that gets approved at this location is our best and maybe our only real chance at meeting the desperate housing needs for this community. And I fear we'd be wasting it on one that only uses 38% of the available possible units there and doesn't make any significant progress to those goals. So if we have any hope of preserving the beautiful hills that we have in our open spaces from further development, if we want to build the types of housing that actually attracts millennials and younger workers, if we want to comply with RENA and therefore avoid fines from the state, and because of SB 35, which gives some teeth to punishing those that don't comply with RENA, avoid losing our permitting privileges to the state of California, the project at this site must accomplish more than what I think the Enclave project does. Thank you.
Thank you. Donna Chisholm? Is Chisholm here? Oh, you know what? I didn't even look. It says that you're in support, but you do not wish to speak. Very good. Paul Cooper does not wish to speak and is in support. See how I picked up on that really quickly? Okay. And is Gerald Hoth here or Holtz? All right, very good. I have no more cards. If there, by all means, come on down. Okay.
Sorry, I came in a little late, so there's my card. I want to start by saying I do support this project. I personally do not want to see any large apartment buildings go up on the property. The Tapo and Alamo project is too large and too dense, and we don't want anything like that here. The developer has proposed a project that is attractive and will be ownership housing, which is good for our neighborhood. We want to protect our property values, and this project is a good one that should be approved. Please move forward with the proposed project. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Now, was that Justin?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Jessica Freeman?
Hi. My objection is, I think, mostly to the density in the fact that there's not enough parking. It doesn't allow for the type of car ownership that people in Simi Valley seem to have. When you drive up and down our streets, you see that it's not unusual for each house to have 4 cars, none of which are parked in the garage. The garages are used for storage, and this doesn't really allow for parking all over the place. They do, they're saying they have, like, when you look at their parking numbers, it's 1 space that isn't on your own property for each person. And all the other cars are expected to be either in your garage or that 1 driveway spot. When we looked at, I'm a member of Neighborhood Council 3, and when we looked at that, they talked about the garages and the driveways, but it was kind of indicated that there was like a regular driveway, which would be 2 spaces. And actually it's 1. So that's a problem as far as I'm concerned. And the access to that parking area by Trader Joe's, I see the hinges on the gate that goes in and out of that area falling off in no time at all, because that's where all these extra cars will be starting to be parked. When people come home from work, they will just park over there and walk into their units. Oh, and then the parking isn't very clear for the live work. Live work? Yeah. It looks like there's maybe 1 spot in front of each of those units where your people that, you know, is coming to your little shop would be able to park. So it seems like there should be more parking in that section. If, you know, like you say, there's only 8 places and only 8 parking spots. So I think there could be more parking there. One of the people on the Neighborhood Council 3 mentioned also parking for RVs at a lot like that development that's on the other side of Galena. They do have a area where they park their vehicles, and now this does not have any space for extra vehicles of that nature. And those, when people have to park those in places that are strictly for that parking of those vehicles, that is another additional expense that they'll have to have on a monthly basis. So, and the other thing, when you noted how those buildings look, I'm reminded of, I don't know if you've seen over at Northridge, right by the Northridge Mall, on that street that's west of the mall, there are a whole bunch of these 4-story buildings, and they look like what you're saying, just plain. They look like tenements, actually. There's no breakup and nothing to make them look like a nice place to live. And I think you were very good in bringing that up, because they could make them a little better. And the windows are small. Our windows on our old houses are bigger than that. And that would help.
Very good.
And that's about it.
Thank you. Rebecca Asbrough? It doesn't say, it says you're in opposition, but it does not identify whether or not you wish to speak.
It's Alberon.
Okay. Very good.
Hi, yes. So my name's Rebecca Alberon. I guess I don't know if this is necessarily a critique or concern necessarily about the project that has been presented, but I think it's more of the projects that are coming up and maybe how this doesn't necessarily meet the needs that I feel that we have. So we recently broke into districts, and I believe that this project falls into District 1. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm going to just address some of the income based on the District 1 needs there. So based on information that was actually put out by the city, when they talk about District 1 and just addressing the needs, and I think another speaker kind of talked about how we really need to have goals as a city in order to be meeting our housing needs. I am a millennial. I don't think I have a decent job, and I definitely wouldn't be able to afford that, and I don't want to live with my parents forever. But just to address the housing, the income for District 1, we're talking about 9% of individuals who live in District 1 have income of 0 to 25,000. When we're talking about income of 25 to 50,000, that's 14% of the population that are currently living in District 1. And income from 50 to 75,000, that's 13%. I'm not really sure the 399,000 to 600,000 that I think was talked about for this particular project, what the income would necessarily have to be in order to be able to afford that as a millennial, and not necessarily have to have additional income. But I don't think that 0 to 25,000 is able to afford that. I don't think that 25 to 50,000 is able to afford that, or even maybe 50 to 75,000 is able to afford that. So I do think that, and I say that maybe not necessarily a critique of this project, but I do really think that projects that do come up as city, planners, commissioners that you guys are, that we really need to be addressing, our goals in order to meet housing. And I think there was kind of like a little bit, maybe not intentional, but people have to rent because they can't afford to necessarily own places to live. And so we're not bringing projects or approving projects that people can afford. Then how do you expect them to then have be stakeholders in their community and necessarily care about the things that are happening in their community? So it's like, if they're not given an opportunity to be brought into that, then it's like we're closing the door on a lot of individuals. They're talking about how renters just kind of, there's no permanency in them. Yeah, they can't afford if their rent is going up every year. So yeah, they're going to be leaving. But I do think that we need to consider what projects are affordable, what is addressing the income residents and their income in those districts that we're building in, but also the city at large. And I have those numbers, but I don't want to go through all the districts. I just do think that it's important that we take that into consideration when we're looking at what projects are coming to the city. I know there's going to be, Bob Huber is going to be visiting the Human Services Agency so that they can talk about housing needs. I know that there's going to be a meeting, I believe, on the 16th talking about like resources and homelessness and things like that. I think that these are where those decisions are made about how we address those future needs. It's kind of really hard when people are already homeless and they can't afford housing. So I think that housing affordability is something positive. I think that we currently have residents in our community that need to be housed, and I think that we should have projects and approved projects that address those needs. So that's it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. I have another card. Francesca Adams is in opposition to the project and does not wish to speak. Are there any other persons who wish to speak? Very good. Leave it up, provide the applicant an opportunity to make comments regarding, wait a minute, my mistake, I went out of turn. Are there any comments of staff regarding statements made during the public hearing?
Just a follow-up regarding the parking. The parking is calculated that, condition A22 will limit the parking to be utilized within the garage. They cannot store items, and the HOA would be required to enforce that. The pedestrian gate that would go to the adjacent Target shopping center would be maintained by the homeowners association as well. It would only be a pedestrian gate. And the parking would be calculated the same for the live-work units. The only difference would be the guest parking, and the guest parking would be calculated at 0.5. However, the specific the specific plan shows that enough parking will be provided.
That enough parking will be?
Yes.
Is that, all right. Any other comments?
No other comments.
I have a couple. I just wanted to add, there was some imaging regarding the landscaping, and also it's contained in your supplemental. This project will comply with the state water efficient landscape ordinance requirements. However, very specifically, there are some grass turf areas, some live turf areas proposed in those common multi-purpose recreational areas, and that is something we can allow. And so I just wanted to be very clear. We do our best to make sure that all the landscaping here is of a drought-tolerant variety, and we'll have the proper irrigation that goes along with it. Commissioner Mann, you raised a question about the noise study. That is condition A20. A revised noise study is required, and that is something that we'll be following up on, just to ensure the measurements are correctly throughout the entire development. And that was the key issue there that we were looking to get corrected. There were a number of public speakers that were more in favor of for sale housing. Jen, can you show the aerial photo of the other property? And what I wanted to remind people that, they may know this, but there is no requirement that the owners live in these homes. And the reason I bring this up is we can look at this site. This is the property right across the street, and those are a bunch of single-family homes, and there's some condominiums there. But those are 50% rented out, even though they're for sale. So that same market reality, all these units, if this project gets built just the way it is, on day one might be 100% owner occupied. But there's no guarantee it's going to stay that way. And in reality, what happens with these units is they get rented out to other people. So you might on one side be in favor of owners living there, but there's no requirement on that. So I just want to be very clear. And that happens in a lot of our condominium developments throughout the city. We talked about the CC&Rs to control the compliance with the live-work aspects, and that's correct. And whenever we do these projects where there's garages, we do put the requirement in there that all the garages are used for parking and not for storage, and that's up to the HOA to maintain. The city's not going to be going out there to double check all those, so just want to be very clear on that. And those were the main comments I wanted to add.
Okay. I apologize. Would the applicant like to respond to any comments regarding statements made during the public hearing?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And then I'll speak briefly, and then if I may, we have a short video to close with. First, with respect to RENA, I'll read from a recent staff report. The city's general plan housing element is in compliance with the government code, and the city's met its requirement to identify sufficient sites suitable for housing development to achieve its allocated RENA numbers. That's a September 25th staff report. This site is not designated, by the way, as a housing opportunity site. And just to double back on density that I was trying to cover earlier with the staff report, General Plan Land Use Policy 32.1 provides that the number of units per gross acre must fall within the range of units allowed for that land use designation or the next lower one, in order to be in compliance with the general plan. RH, residential high, that we're proposing is the next lower one to very high that's mentioned in the staff report. So that's completely consistent with the general plan. Also, the mixed use designation in the general plan contains no minimum density. There's a maximum of 35 per acre, but there is no minimum. And then lastly, our density proposal, as I think we've shown, complies with the direction we got from both our neighbors and City Council on January 28th. And with that, I thank you for your time, and we have a video. It's less than 2 minutes, I believe. And I apologize for the soundtrack.
Very good, thank you. Okay. If there are no further questions, we will close the public testimony portion of the hearing and reserve comments to members of the commission. Are there questions of staff that anybody has at this point?
I have one.
Commissioner Castleberry?
So Rena did come up and just cited in finding number 2 that this has considered the effect on the housing needs that we have in the community. If I'm not mistaken, this would fall in the above moderate category?
That's correct.
And that is the one category that we are currently meeting under RENA?
That's correct.
Okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, I got one.
Commissioner Mann?
So let me find my page now, sorry. The specific plan where we talk about parking, those are numbers that the city has come up with for the 0.5 per guest, the 0.5 for the live work. Are these numbers anywhere else in the city, or these are numbers that we've just created for this project?
These specific plan numbers apply to this project, but they're very compatible with other multifamily housing developments where we base it based on the number of bedrooms, we base it on guest parking requirements, as well as a commercial parking component here.
So the residential guest, 156, but at 0.25, that's consistent somewhere else in the city already?
Yeah,
It just seems like a low number.
That's why the Pacific plan would allow that flexibility. It's a little bit, our standards are a little bit more restrictive.
Sometimes with state density bonus law, the numbers are much lower, but it's, you know, you can look at parking and it ranges. Typically a half space per unit is typical for a guest parking requirement. So 164 total number of units would trigger 80 guest parking.
But this one is residential guest is 0.25.
Yeah, that is low.
So so arbitrarily, we bottom line is the specific plan has just created this new
Yes.
parking at 0.25.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I have a question, Sam. There was, I thought, a pretty reasonable question that was brought up about whether or not there'd be adequate parking for if there's a restaurant in the property. And I think, what is the total number of ostensible, usable parking spaces that are near the commercial element to the project?
I think it was 53 spaces is what's
53?
provided for the residential, for the commercial parking.
I interrupted and I apologize. Can you say that again?
53 spaces are provided for the commercial parking.
And
I'm sorry.
within
63.
That seems high somehow. So near the commercial area.
So there's a required 53 parking spaces, and they're going to be providing 62 parking spaces. So parking would be calculated at 1 per 250 for the retail portion, and then 1 per 100 if there was a restaurant put in place.
I see. All right, but in terms of, without, this was good. Whoops, Shazam. This was good, but it was a little hard to exactly see where all the parking spaces were. What would be the proximity of those spaces to, that's not somebody walking from the back of the project to the front.
So the commercial parking would be provided on the eastern portion between McDonald's and that new retail facility, and then there's parking that wraps around directly in front of it. Jen, do you mind?
Oh, okay. That's,
So the parking, if you look right here, this is where all the commercial parking spaces would be, and then also directly in front of the retail building.
okay. Yeah, it's kind of hard from that graphic to see exactly
Yeah.
what it is, but on the site plan that Mr. Peros has shown me here, I realize not everybody has this, but there's a drawing here that very nicely identifies that there is space parking spaces in close proximity to the commercial element. Okay, very good. I wanted to talk about if one of the conditions of the many that we were required to find in order to approve the project has to do with whether or not the project meets the design elements of the series, the design guidelines. I think that was, I'm going to say it's 6, but it doesn't look like it is. Maybe it's, anyway, this gets down to the question that I brought up before, and I get the impression that there's some support for the idea that we would like to see some additional design elements applied to most of the projects that seem to be a little less than stellar with respect to that. My thinking is that if the project were to be approved, that condition wouldn't have been met, so we're either going to need to see it again to approve that, you know, or I don't know if it would be, you know, appropriate to defer that to staff and then possibly, you know, send it out as we do with many administrative approvals that we receive in the mail, and they have a chance to take a look at it. I don't know if that would work, and I see Mr. Caceres suddenly started moving. So what are the thoughts? We can do the latter? All right. So, and then if there's a problem, if it's insufficient, then we would need 2 commissioners to raise their hand and say, no, we need to take a look at this, and then it would have to come back. And since you don't want to do that, you would really want to make sure you do a wonderful job. I like that proposal. So the idea is that if the commission wishes to do that, it's possible that we can approve it with the one condition pending, and the pending or the condition would be that the developer would provide additional evidence of what that design would be, that the commission would have an opportunity to look at it and have a standard review period of time to look at it.
Well, I thought you wanted to handle that administratively and leave it up to the city's planner to make that determination.
Correct, I do. But then it comes out.
I'm not inclined to recommend that. I mean, you can defer to staff to take a look at it and make a determination.
We can defer it to staff, but we wouldn't have the opportunity to look at it to see if we agree with the decision by staff.
Well, they're entitled to have a decision tonight, so I don't think you can condition to come back.
So,
Surtees?
Yeah, and unless there's a specific design element that you would like us to improve tonight, we can.
Well, I don't want to, you know, design on the fly here. I think that's probably the worst of all worlds. But at the same time, perhaps, you know, I mean, look, I'm just one person up here, but you know, maybe we could express a little bit further that what we want, and I think that you've seen this has happened before where we've had projects up. I mean, we sent the Land Sea project back for exactly this problem. This isn't the first time this has happened. And as a matter of fact, you've told me on a number of occasions that you've encouraged developers to go back and look at particular meetings where this issue has come up before, and you know, we've towed a pretty tight line on that. So I'm okay. You know, it depends on what, you know, 3 out of 5 of us want to do. I believe the staff understands what the issue is, and that this is something that staff could handle quite nicely, and I don't want to slow, you know, the project down unnecessarily. But if it were to be approved, but that is a sine qua non with me. I mean, that's something I would have to see in order to find that condition. Absent that opportunity, I cannot make that finding.
Well, then, what you could do is that if the applicant wishes to desire to continue the item, to come back with some new proposals and see if it meets your specifications at that time.
Well, I'm okay with staff handling it and you demonstrating, you know, but at the same time, you know, if they say no, you know, it's no. So, I'm okay with that, as opposed to the other. I don't know how long it would take to come back. Okay, well, that's the only other questions I have of staff at this point. So I guess we will truly, anybody have any further questions of staff?
No questions.
Oh, Commissioner Tolson?
Again, this gets approved tonight, and they decide to forego the project and get somebody else to come in and buy the property. How does that affect the number of units that could be built?
If the project were to be approved tonight, it'd be, you'd be recommending approval to the city council. The city council will have to actually take the final action on the general plan and the specific plan. The specific plan is the regulatory document that's supposed to guide this. Now, what's the challenge in today's world is some of the state laws that have been enacted recently. Very specifically, the Housing Accountability Act, and very specifically, state density bonus law. And if for some reason a developer option, something happened after this project was entitled and approved, could somebody come along and ask for something with those legal protections to do it? And that, that is the fear. Once you change the general plan, you lose that control. If you need a tool, if you need an assurance, how could we get there? Probably the only thing I think that's in our development code is what we call a development agreement. And a development agreement is a contract between the city and the developer, and where you kind of stipulate exactly what it is. And there's a little bit of a way that the developer locks in fees and conditions and things, and the city usually realizes a community benefit out of the project. And that's a legal way to establish kind of a very firm expectation of what's to occur on that property. That development agreement was included in tonight's request. It's something we did recently for the Planning Commission did for the Rising Realty project, where the commission wanted a conference center to be included with the hotel project in exchange for them going to mixed use and adding residential, and that was the last time we did it. But it doesn't happen that often, but that is the nature of these mixed use, these general plan amendments. When you change them, you're probably opening yourself up to state density bonus law and Housing Accountability Act.
Which is technically what the neighbors don't want.
Well, I mean,
that's how they vote.
Yeah, I mean, it's what's happening at Tapao and Alamo potentially, what's happening in some other projects where much denser projects and much higher scale of buildings is making some of the neighborhood upset. And so that's the issues with those, but they're all under the current rules that are allowed by the state of California.
Right. Mm-hmm. That was it for me.
Is there a reason why we didn't do that on this project? Do a development agreement?
It wasn't requested. Normally, what the applicant was requesting was kind of in that little zone where the neighborhoods and the council had given some direction, and this seemed to be meeting those needs. But
was this brought up to the council?
A development agreement?
Yeah.
Well, when it was at the general plan pre-screening, everything the applicant said tonight was correct. They showed them kind of all the aspects of the project, and the consensus at that time was, they were comfortable with what they were saying.
But were they aware that if they approve the land use change, that they would need a development agreement in order to protect what we're approving? Was that what the conversation had?
It didn't come up.
Okay.
January is a long time ago, and it's amazing how many things have changed in the state just over the last 10 months.
No, I was just curious if the council had that information at their discretion when they made their decision. Okay.
That is something that the council can condition, well, to consider?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
Can we? Make your recommendation.
Okay. So we could make recommendation that the council take consider instead of proceeding by. Actually, the interesting thing is if they do a development agreement, then they have to comply with all of the requirements in the design elements and the general plan and all that good stuff, right? They don't have these opportunities for some avoidance of some of those conditions that they have in a specific plan. Is that accurate?
No, I would say the development, what they're proposing today with the specific plan over superseding the development code and the design guidelines would still apply, even with the development agreement. The development agreement, again, is just a legal binding contract between the city and the applicant to ensure on everybody's, like, what's being proposed is what gets built. And sometimes you can extend the timing. Sometimes these things take 10 years or so when they're on more complex sites, and that's the reason we have that up at the hotel.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Commissioner Castleberry?
Yeah, could we vote to continue this item until we have a developer agreement in front of us for us to consider the recommendation onto council?
I would confer with the city attorney, but that is an option for you if for some reason. This is what happens on our other projects where the Planning Commission has asked for a condition of zoning to kind of lock in those there. That's not typically what we do on a project like this. A development agreement is one tool.
Okay.
Unless I see the applicant getting up, and so I think I would like to make a comment on that.
Yeah, I'm going to open the public hearing, and, oh, look who's here.
Thank you.
And, yeah, if we would like your input on this.
Yeah, and thank you for that opportunity, Mr. Chairman. The specific plan before you tonight caps the density at 164 units, period, and 6,000 feet of commercial, and up to 8 live-work units. So if you were to approve the specific plan, it's capped at 164.
I have a question for the city attorney.
Yeah, I do too. Go ahead.
So,
Your comment on that? Thank you. We'll close the public hearing.
It is possible for future, if this process or if this particular project doesn't go through, it is possible for a subsequent owner or buyer to come back to this planning commission, seek a specific plan amendment, make some of the changes. And as Stratis was indicating, there could be other tools they can use pursuant to the Housing Accountability Act that might strengthen their position. In other words, you can have a higher density.
See, yeah, I think the question that Commissioner Tolson was bringing up, though, is all right, fine, so it's approved, you have a specific plan, life's good, you go down the road, something happens, somebody decides not to build, they decide to sell to somebody else comes in and says, guess what, it's now been designated as a location where residential can be built, and guess what, I want to build something different, scrap the specific plan, and build it under high-density housing with all the bonuses, et cetera, and at the max. Next thing you know, you've got, I did the math, 300 and something units. So that's what Commissioner Tolson, I believe, was concerned about. And what we heard subsequent to that was Mr. Peros saying that the only way to avoid that potential, and this is why I asked the question, are you guys going to build it? And this is something that we really take seriously about wanting to make sure that we're not opening doors that you can't close. And so Mr. Peros is saying, well, you've got the opportunity for this development agreement. And that the development agreement would, as it's been put to us, I believe, be pretty supportable to avoid that eventuality. Is that accurate?
I think that's a very, other cities have employed this tool. This isn't unusual for some cities to require specific plans and development agreements to ensure the right project gets built in the right area.
Going to open the public hearing again. I just want to know if you have an objection to proceeding by a development agreement, or having I take it a development agreement can be added to the specific plan?
It's its own separate document.
So you can incorporate all of this without having to redo everything and just have the development plan that says incorporates by reference the specific plan, and this is how it's going to be built. And if he sells it to somebody else, guess what? It's commercial property.
Yeah, they're buying a development agreement as well.
Okay. And your thought on that?
The development agreement can be transferred to a new buyer.
And how quickly, do you have any objection to that?
Yes.
What is it?
Well, it's not needed, and also if I need him, our land use attorney, Jack Rubin, a partner with Shepard Mullen. Keep in mind what we're doing this evening, if it were to be approved, not presupposing anything, but if it were to be approved, the CPD, the underlying zoning of CPD is staying in place. What we're doing is SP as an overlay. The specific plan is an overlay. So if someone were to come in down the road and want to do something different, they would have to either amend that specific plan, which is capped at 164 units, or propose a new specific plan, which would be subject to your approval. So, and if the specific plan went away, we're back to CPD-based zoning, which doesn't allow any housing. Am I saying that all correct?
That's correct.
all correct.
That's correct.
All right. So
the development agreement's unnecessary.
You know, he drove all the way down here. I'm going to let him say.
Okay, all right.
An hour and 40 minutes. Jack Rubens with the Shepard Mullen Law Firm. I think there may be a misunderstanding about what a development agreement does, so I'll just make a couple of points. First, cities generally don't have the right to impose a development agreement. A development agreement can be requested by a developer because they want to vest their rights earlier than California law otherwise allows. Normally, you don't vest your rights until you have a building permit and you do some work. With a development agreement, you're vested as soon as it's approved, so it's a favorable tool to developers. If a developer wants to get a development agreement to get that vesting, then the city in return has the right to ask for community benefits. But there's nothing about a development plan that forces a developer to build a specific project. It simply insulates you by vesting your rights against changes in the law that would occur after your project's approved. So if you have a development agreement and 6 months later the city quadruples its traffic fee, the developer wouldn't be subject to that because they would have vested rights, whereas otherwise they would be. So that's the benefit to a developer. That's why a developer wants a development agreement. That's what a development agreement gives a developer. The one thing that the city gets, and it's really the only thing, is community benefits. But there's never anything in a development agreement that says you must build this project or this project can never be changed. It's the entitlements that cover the project scope, what can be built, what can't be built, what the development standards are, not the development agreement. I hope that helps.
Well, I think I understood what you said, and I imagine others did too. My question to you is the other piece of the pie, is what, I beg your pardon, I've forgotten your name already. What Mark said about you know, I mean, we've been given, I think, a couple of different versions of, you know, how strong the specific plan controls what might be built there in the future, and whether or not, in response to Commissioner Tolson's question, you know, we can have that great big giant, you know, change in the sky where somebody comes in and says, well, you know, I want to build something else.
Right.
And you've changed it to, you've changed the zoning to residential high, but now you seem to be telling me that you're not changing the zoning. You're simply allowing through the specific plan this to be built on top of CPD. Is that
correct.
accurate?
That is accurate. That is correct.
Well,
This
if
is
that's true, then I don't think that there's a, I don't see the problem.
We don't either.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions of?
No, that answered my question. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I like attorneys to get their day at court. All right. Other questions? Mr. Caceres, what, do you have a comment regarding that?
No, I would generally concur with what legal counsel for the developer has stated. And I think the developer indicated that the process would be a subsequent developer could come in, seek an amendment of the specific plan, but that would go before this particular body, so you'd have a chance to look at it.
Very good. Questions? All righty. So I guess we will ask for comments. Oh, the one thing that I do want to see if we do apparently have agreement regarding, we want to see the development, the design changes, the elements on there, and the way to do it would be to provide the opportunity for staff, and then city council can overlook. When's this going to go to the council, if it goes to the council? Well, it's going to go, when's it going to go?
The earliest would be 6 weeks, or
About 4 to 6 weeks.
4 to 6 weeks.
So we would ask the developer if you get that done in 4 weeks, give staff, or at the most, and give staff the opportunity to include that in the city council staff report. Would that be sufficient time?
So you're recommending a condition for the applicant?
Well, yeah, because I don't think that I can make one of the findings that you require in order to grant the specific plan. So, yeah, and I think that we've got some consensus on that. So absent the developer or the applicant, identifying or adding some of these design elements and architectural features into the project as we discussed specifically, you know, whatever they provide, they're going to provide. You know, I think I would give staff the opportunity to say this is insufficient, and then you would give the instruction, or rather the recommendation that we make to the city council, and your recommendation that this is insufficient. Alternatively, it could be wonderfully sufficient, and the city council would have the opportunity to overlook that and make a decision. I'm very comfortable with that process.
That's an acceptable process.
Excellent. All righty. All right, comments. We'll start with Commissioner Castleberry.
Yay.
I've got a few. So I concur with you on the design. That's not my only concern, however. I would like to see the revised noise study, because I know that they're going to do one, and we're going to recommend approval without seeing the final noise study. That's of concern to me, and I don't feel comfortable making that recommendation without having all the facts in front of me. Beyond that, I've made it very clear every time we've had a zone change, I'd like to see some sort of benefit for the community in zone changes. I don't see any community benefit in this whatsoever. I see that they are going to build some new houses where there were 1,000 jobs previously. In the staff report, it does highlight that we may be gaining 500 residents and possibly 80 new employment opportunities in this site, but that's nowhere near the 1,000 jobs we lost at Farmers. and I really think we need to consider very carefully what we're losing. I think that we are not promoting, and this is going to go ahead and be in finding number 2. The city did not consider the effect on the housing needs of this community. We know that our arena process is coming up. We have yet to meet our very low or low income housing goals. The only target we are meeting is above moderate, which is what this falls under. Beyond that, I don't believe that the pattern of land use here promotes efficient development. I very much think that what we need, and we've seen that our housing mix is not balanced. Right now, we have about 84% single-family detached housing and only 16% multifamily. We are supposed to be somewhere around 80-20, so we are out of sync. I really think that we need to consider other types of projects that really do help meet the housing needs that we're facing. This parcel is just so large that I think the whole community as a whole needs to go ahead and participate in this process, not just the immediate neighbors. That being said, I really would like to see this item continued for a public benefit to be considered. What that public benefit is, I would leave up to the developer, but there's no community space here. There's very small retail. The live-work units are very few. Beyond that, I really just feel like this is more of the same of what we've been approving, just more single-family detached houses. That's all I have.
Commissioner Rice?
Okay. We don't determine what projects show up at the Planning Commission. We get what we get, and we do what we can with what we get. That's not something that we choose to do. We do need a variety of housing, and this project offers us a variety of housing. Maybe it's not the workforce housing that we definitely need. I agree with Ms. Merchant that we do need workforce housing, and we don't get it from this, but we do get a variety of housing. The other thing that we get is that, yes, 500 residents possibly, but those are not going to be 500 people that come from outside the city. Some of them will be, but a lot of them will be moving from other homes into these, which will free up other houses for other people. Many of them will be more affordable probably than these projects. So just because these may start at $400,000 doesn't mean that somebody's not leaving a $300,000 home or apartment or whatever and freeing that up for someone else. I really appreciate the fact that this applicant's gone out and gone through this process and actually reached out to the neighbors and talked to the neighbors, which we rarely see, at least to this degree. And this has been a long process. Before January, people have been talking about this process, or talking about this property throughout the city. And I've been to mayor's forums and other things where people have specifically referred to this project or this property. This connecting it to the Target Center and next door, and the fact that there's retail across the street does something which most projects we get don't have. It makes it a walkable neighborhood. It means that these people, if they choose not to drive, they have the ability to actually go to the grocery store without driving. They have the ability to go to a restaurant without driving, go get something to eat without driving, and almost every other project we've seen, that's not the reality. The amenities that this project have are nice. The garden, the bocce ball, and the multi-purpose lawn, and the pool, and all that stuff, those are nice. But we've seen some of those things before. I really like the visual on Cochran Street. I think that's beautiful, and I applaud the architect for that. That's like my favorite part of the whole thing. I like the live-work housing. I love that. I wish there was more of it, honestly. But I think that if we start here, that other applicants are going to come in and try to do the same thing. So anyway, with the exception of the ornamentation, especially on the three-story buildings and on the west side of the building, I like this project, and I see it serves a need for the city.
Commissioner Mann?
I'm going to defer to Commissioner Tolson.
Commissioner Tolson.
This is more of a housing project than it is a mixed use. And we're taking away 1,000 jobs to add 80 maybe part-time jobs. If it's a restaurant, you're getting part-timers, you're not getting full-time. The design elements can be added and improved, but that's minor. I question the chance of selling this off to somebody else. And those are my thoughts.
Okay, you go to me now. Turn the microphone on. What we need is light industrial. This project won't give us light industrial. I understand that. We need affordable housing to meet our arena numbers, but we can't put the burden of affordable housing on one developer. We need more, we don't need a lot more commercial space. Yes, I would like to see more commercial space. However, when I look at the vacant stores that Simi has for both commercial and retail, I think what you have there for the mix of the live work, which is a great concept, the retail proposed primarily for restaurants, for the people that live there, I think that's great. You have reached a good cross-section between the least expensive townhomes to the single-family homes. I would like to see more land, but I understand bottom line is people come home, they go to their house, they don't really spend a whole lot of time in their yards. If they did, they would not buy in this project, they would buy somewhere else. Noise study, obviously there's a concern because you're right up to the freeway. The project to the east has the buffer zone. There's not a whole lot you can do without wiping out one whole or two whole buildings up there. But a noise study that staff can deal with just to make sure that you do what you can to lessen the noise factor on the entire development. The parking, that space that everyone kind of went on with to the left of where the retail is, even if you gate it, you're still going to have people wandering there going into it. I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. I love that idea of having that community space. I don't think it's going to require a huge amount of parking, especially if you're going to have people walking or meandering from the condos next door. Overall, I would like to see some change in the project with the articulation, but other than that, I think it fits for what our community needs now. It doesn't fit every aspect of what we need, but we can't put that burden on you. So overall, I like the project.
There's two resolutions. Okay. So 8. No. All right. Yeah, I apologize for the delay, but I was trying to confirm something. Condition A20 says that concurrent with the plan check submittal, an applicant must submit a revised noise study that includes a noise contour map for the entire project site and establishes any necessary noise attenuation measures, et cetera, et cetera. I'm comfortable with this condition as meeting the questions. I think it's a very, very good question, and I agree with you, but I do believe that condition A20 satisfies at least my concern with respect to that. And so I think that that's been well thought of in advance by staff, and hopefully and it'll have to comply, or guess what, they're not going forward. I have to admit that I was terribly perplexed. When I first saw this project, I didn't like it. I didn't like the design. I didn't like the location of things. I wondered why there's 3 stories housing and 2-story housing, and why there's just so many things. And I didn't think there was enough integration of that way it looked. And then, I really started taking a look at it again, and when everything else came, and I started thinking, about this. My preference for this project would be leave it the way it is. If we had some reasonable expectation that within a certain period of time, somebody would come forward and build what I think we sorely lack in this town, and that's A-class business opportunities for offices. I think we're sorely lacking A-quality office space, and as a result of that, I personally know people who have looked to move their businesses in Simi Valley and couldn't, because they couldn't find a quality office building. I would have hoped that there would have been some, as part of the mixed use, some more office space integration inside this. And I'm sure that there's lots of people who would have liked a whole bunch of other things. And so I really tried to sit down and I struggled over this, and I started to realize that, you know, that building that's there, it's got to cost a fortune to knock down. The property that's there, you know, you've got to remove all this parking lot. This is a very challenging site, and it's been a challenging site for a long time, and I know that there have been you know, we've not done particularly well at attracting somebody who wanted to come in and do something with this site. This site is a blight on the city. It is a burden on the properties next to it. It is a burden on the businesses across from it. It's a burden to the city. I would prefer, honestly, I honestly believe, I wish there was somebody coming forward and wanted to build this fabulous office park, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I agree with Commissioner Rice regarding this is the first time that we've seen you know this kind that's truly applicable for all these things that we really talk about. We have people come in and they want to have apartment buildings, and they talk about you know how this is great that it's you know close to various things, and sometimes they're a quarter mile away. Well, a lot of folks, especially in the sun, they're just not going to walk a quarter mile. We had a senior development not too long ago where they were talking about things that were at a half mile away. And they, yeah, they're going to get out there, you know, maybe, but I don't know. I mean, but this is legitimate. This is right across the street. It's an opportunity for people to do the kinds of things that we're talking about here. I'm not fond of some little things. I'm not fond of the parallel parking. Then I started thinking, wait a minute, cars in the future are going to parallel park themselves, so I guess that's not a big time problem. But these little things. And the other thing that strikes me you know, quite strongly, we haven't seen a project that I remember approving that had a 3 in front of the 300,000 number in ever. It's been a long time since we've seen anything like that. And that really does speak to you know, a specific need. You know, all the other projects that we look at are high fives or higher. There are a lot of, I think that the applicant made good use of the fact that we do have a lot of apartments in the pipe, and you know, that have been approved, and I know that there are a lot of projects coming forward that have what would be referred to as workforce housing that are right before us. And so there's you know, a lot of movement in that direction, a lot of increase in density opportunities. I'm not concerned about the state coming in at this point. I think that we're doing not a wonderful job, we're doing the best we can, and very reasonably we're meeting our particular obligations with respect to these mandates that are being imposed upon us. I would have done something different, but at the same time, you know, I don't have the millions and millions of dollars necessary to do something a little different. I do want the design elements to go in here. I don't like the phrase particularly that the perfect is the enemy of the good, but sometimes it's simply true. It's not, you know, is it perfect? No. But it's going to get rid of the farmers building. It's going to meet the needs and provide the benefits that were discussed tonight. I do believe that those things create much benefit for our city, and that's something that we should seriously want to happen. I agreed with some of the arguments that were made against it. You know, Mr. Luce had some compelling points. Commissioner Castleberry has some compelling points, and I'm not in disagreement with virtually any of those arguments that were made. But at this point, I do believe that this is a project that I will support as conditioned. And you know, there have been times when I've walked out of here and yes, there's a great decision tonight. I have to admit to a certain amount of scraping my own fingernails on chalkboards just a little bit. I don't know what metaphor to use, but at the same time, I'm glad to see this project. I do believe it will provide benefit to the city. Okay. So at this point, if I can find it.
Page 30.
Yes. May I have a reading of the resolution?
SVPC resolution number?
We have more, yes, we have multiple resolutions. What? Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
So this would be item 9A, resolution number SVPC 142019, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Simi Valley denying conditional use permit CUPS 812 and the project's mitigated negative declaration.
Denial? The other one.
Do I read this one? I'm sorry.
You don't read the, not the denial one, not the denial one.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is item 11A1, resolution number SVPC 182019, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Simi Valley recommending to the City Council approval of GPA 104, SPS 31, ZS 744, PDS 1066, TPS 693, TT 6024, to subdivide and construct a mixed-use development consisting of 164 residences, open space areas, and 6,000 square feet of commercial space on a 12.83-acre parcel located at 3039 East Cochran Street, and to adopt a mitigated negative declaration for the subject applications as amended.
That's fine.
Very good. May we have a, Chair will entertain a motion?
I move to adopt a resolution recommending approval of GPA 104, SPS 31, ZS 744, PDS 1066, TPS 693, TT 6024, and the project's mitigated negative declaration as amended.
Is there a motion has been made by Commissioner Rice? Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Mann. Call for the vote. And then there's a second.
No, there's just one.
The motion passes. There is no appeal period for GPA 104, SPS 31, ZS 744, PDS 1066, TPS 693, TT 6024, and the items will proceed to the City Council with the Planning Commission's recommendation. Very good. Okay, quickly, oral staff communications and reports. Oral communication reports. Staff?
Thank you, Chairman Hodge. Just one housekeeping item. At the last Planning Commission meeting on September 4th, the one that went to 1:30 in the morning.
1:40.
Oh, 1:40 in the morning, yes.
Yeah.
I want to get credit for all that. Due to the extended duration of that meeting, approximately 9 minutes of the public testimony portion of the meeting were not captured on the recording at the city's website. However, there is the entirety of the meeting can be viewed on a YouTube link, and we have that information over here. So if anyone ever wanted to find the complete recording of that meeting, we do have it available for them. It just may not be on Granicus on the city website just yet. Other than that, we do have a meeting 2 weeks from tonight, and that's all I have as far as communications.
Any commissioners have anything to report?
I do.
Commissioner Castleberry.
The third week in September, I was fortunate enough to attend the American Planning Association's California Chapter Conference in Santa Barbara from Sunday until Wednesday with many members of staff. It was an incredibly informative session. A lot of cities, not just our size, but larger and smaller, are going to be facing significant challenges in the next cycle of RENA. As it stands now, we are projected to have to build between 3,500 and 7,200 units. We have to find zone land for that. We will find out on November 8th that SCAG has appealed that number to the state. We'll find out this week if the state approves the appeal, and if it does, we will find out on November 8th how many units we're going to be planning for. Beyond that, a lot of cities are looking at really adaptive things to do in terms of zoning code updates, which would be really good for our city, I think, to take a look at. And beyond that, just really great sessions, and the staff attended a lot of the interesting sessions that I was able to attend as well.
Terrific, thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, Mobile Home Rent Mediation Board? Oh, did I miss something? Nope.
You know, I do just.
All right, none tonight. Tree Advisory Board?
Nothing tonight.
Adjournment. This concludes the meeting of October 9, 2019. The next meeting is October 23, 2019. Meeting's adjourned.
Yeah, no, sorry about the $200 thing.